All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the truly paradoxical world of gambling regulations in India. It's this amazing place where ancient traditions, old colonial-era laws, and a booming digital future are all colliding at once. So to really get a sense of the scale here, let's just start with a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around, 1.4 billion. I mean, that's the population of India, a number that makes it one of the largest potential markets on the entire planet for any industry, especially digital entertainment. And it's not just potential, right? The numbers are already there. India's online gaming scene isn't just growing, it's absolutely exploding. We're talking projections hitting a staggering $8.6 billion by 2027. And it's all being driven by this huge, young, and incredibly tech-savvy population. So that brings up a really big question, doesn't it? With all that money on the table and all those people ready to play, why on earth is India one of the most complicated places in the world to place a bet? Well, to figure that out, we've got to untangle a web of old laws and new realities. Okay, so the real problem here is this massive clash. You've got this super modern digital economy just racing ahead, but it's being held back by a set of laws that were written in a completely different century, a completely different world, really. See, to really get what's happening today, you have to understand that this legal maze wasn't built overnight. It's been pieced together, bit by bit, for over 150 years. It's not one big rulebook. It's more like a patchwork of rules, all layered on top of each other. And this isn't just some boring history lesson, you know? It's really the story of how powers shifted from a centralized British government to a modern decentralized republic, and that shift completely changed the game. This timeline really shows you that constant push and pull. It all starts way back in 1867 with a British law banning public gambling. But the real absolute game changer is 1950. This is the moment when India's brand new constitution basically says, hey, states, you're in charge now. You make your own gambling laws. And that one decision, that's where all the complexity we see today really comes from. And that is the single most important point to understand. It's what created this legal patchwork quilt, where something that's totally fine in one state could get you in trouble just a few miles away across the border. So if every single state is making its own rules, how does anyone possibly run a business in this space? Well, the answer, and really the key to this whole puzzle, comes down to one critical legal idea that the courts have focused on. And this is so much more than just words, right? This is the legal foundation for the whole industry. What's really interesting is why the courts did this. The thinking goes that a game of skill, well, that's a legitimate trade, it's a profession, and it's protected by the Constitution. But a game of pure luck, that's just wagering, and it doesn't get that same protection. And that one idea, it changes everything. So this chart just lays it all out perfectly. You've got games of skill over here, things like rummy, poker, fantasy sports, which are often protected by law. And then, on the other side, games of pure chance, like roulette or slot machines, which are treated as traditional gambling and are way more restricted. The difference is night and day. Okay, so now that we have that skill versus chance key, let's go on a quick tour and see just how wild this state-by-state rulebook really gets out in the real world. So first up, you've got Goa. Just think of it as India's version of Las Vegas. They used their power way back in '76 to legalize casinos, but with a catch. They had to be in fancy five-star hotels or on ships out on the water. What this did was create this unique, self-contained hub for tourism that you won't find anywhere else in the country. Now, compare that to a place like Sikkim, which went a completely different route. They basically built their own little digital bubble. Inside Sikkim, online sports betting and casino games are totally legal. But the second you step outside the state, nope. So it shows a model for how to do it, but man, it's tough to scale something like that. And then you have Nagaland, which did something really clever. They just ignored games of chance entirely and instead built a legal system just for licensing online games of skill. And this was a total game changer. It became a kind of blueprint for how a poker or fantasy sports site could get a license in one place and then legally operate in many others. All right, so we've just navigated this, incredibly complex legal maze. So where does that leave us? What does the future hold for what could be one of the biggest gaming markets in the world?
Well, the biggest recent shakeup can be summed up in one number, 28%. A nationwide 28% tax was slapped on the total amount of money that players put in. And believe me, this sent absolute shockwaves through the whole industry.
So you can imagine, if you're a company trying to work here, it's a really tough environment. You're trying to deal with a different rule book for every state. You've got this huge tax bill, and there's always the risk that a state could just wake up one morning and change all the rules on you.
But, and this is a huge but, on the other side of that coin, the opportunity is just massive. You simply can't ignore the raw numbers, a young, tech-savvy population that is hungry for this kind of digital entertainment. And this quote from someone inside the industry just nails it. It's the absolute definition of a high-risk, high-reward market. The hurdles are huge, for sure, but the potential prize is unlike pretty much anywhere else on the planet.
So, this all brings us to the big final question, right? People are talking about a unified federal framework. So will India finally create one clear set of rules to unlock this billion-dollar industry? Or is it going to stay this complex, fascinating, and honestly fragmented legal maze?